So, being a musician living in a small space such as a camper trailer or RV or even a small apartment can be kind of difficult because, as we know, gear takes up a lot of space. And I only have two amplifiers. This is one of them. I have four guitars right now, and I'm building a fifth one, so I'll make a video about that whenever that's finished. And it's just really hard to get all of your gear into one spot where it's easily accessible and you don't have to fool with cases, depending on how much you move around and stuff like that. So I built this DIY guitar stand, and I want to share with you guys how I built that. Now, the cool thing about this stand that I built is it did not require any wood glue, it did not require any power tools, and it did not require really anything other than what you can buy at a local hardware store for like $12 to $15. I used masking tape, I used a can of spray paint, a can of just wipe on wood finish, and a saw that I bought for $12 on Amazon a while back. And that's all the tools that I use. That's everything I used to put this together. The materials used besides that were 5/8 dowels, also you can buy at a hardware store. And then the joints are actually CPVC, which is a lighter gauge PVC, generally used for less than 100 PSI of water pressure. They fit the 5/8 diameter quite a bit better than Schedule 40 PVC, which is what I initially looked at. And I realized that the Schedule 40 PVC joints are right around $3 a piece, and these were about 60 to 70 cents a piece. So I bought 30 or so different joints for about, $20 or whatever it was, and it made it much more cost effective to do this project in my trailer. And then lastly, I used this 1/2-inch pipe insulation for the neck cradles and for the feet of the stand itself. Now I'm going to roll the footage of me putting this thing together and building it, and at the end I'll talk about exact specs and what I would change if I was going to build it again. I started by laying down some plastic, taking some 400 grit sandpaper, sanding all the dowels so that they were smooth when I applied the finish. After that, I took a wet rag and wiped them down so that there would be no sawdust left when I started to apply finish. This is Minwax Ebony Wipe-On Stain, which is one of my favorite stains to use. It looks really pretty and it's very easy to apply. Next step was to spray paint the fittings, making sure that I got all the way around them. This is a semi-gloss black paint that I got from Walmart. Using a $12 saw from Amazon, I cut each of the dowels to exact length, and I didn't want to show this because it's pretty boring, so I'll explain the lengths at the end of the video. Leading us to assembly. Now, some of these dowels fit very well into the fittings and others of them were not tight enough, so I would take masking tape, wrap it around the end 2 or 3 times, and it would fit fine. As you can see, I'm assembling the neck cradle here, but a straight rod in its place would work just fine. However, it is very aesthetically pleasing. It kind of goes without saying, but if you're going to assemble in sections like I did this one, make sure you have all the pieces before you start and the right amount of them. This 1/2-inch pipe insulation cost me about $3 for 6 feet of it. With a tape measure and a knife, it's very easy to cut it to exact measurements. For a neck cradle like this, 5 inches seems to be about the perfect length. If you use classical guitars primarily with a wider neck, you might want to lengthen that out to about 6 inches. So now that you guys have seen the process, we'll go over the specs and things that I would change. First off, what I like about this is I like this front swoop right here that keeps my main acoustic guitar. This one I play pretty much all the time. It's my Martin GPC, the best guitar I've ever owned, so far anyways. And I like to keep it right in front, easily accessible. So I like having it on the front because as I pick this one up more and more, it gives me less chance to bump it on something and, you know, having to put it away and try to feed it in between these slots here. So I really like that. These are at a 45-degree angle. These braces are 7.5 to where they go into the 45, and then 3.5 to 4 inches on the front here with little dowels on the front just to make them look kind of pretty. So I like that dimension. Coming back here, all of these bars are 26 inches in length, and then the cross pieces here are 9.5 inches. Now, if I was going to build this for big guitars, like if I had multiple Dreadnoughts or multiple GPCs or, you know, Grand Auditoriums from Taylor or something like that, I would actually build this about 1.5 inches wider. So instead of 9.5, I would have built this at about 11 inches wide. The reason for that is because right here you can see that my guitar just barely sits up against this. And part of that's because I don't have the foam on it like I have on this one, because that would keep it sitting out about this far away. So that's kind of an issue with this guitar too, not quite as much, but this is actually on the narrow side of what this stand can hold. So these other 3 guitars, if I was building it for them, I would build it probably at about 8.5 inches wide instead of the 9.5 that I built it at. So the width is kind of a weird one. I think where I ended up at 9.5 inches was pretty good, but maybe I would have gone 9. Just having more of the smaller guitars and having this guitar on the front like this, I probably could have gone 9 or 8.5, and it would have been better for my electrics to sit off the ground a little bit and for this acoustic to sit off the ground a little bit. But that as it is, I still think it's okay on the width. Moving along to the spacing in between. So in between these 2 guitars, it is 7.5 from this post to this post. Now the reason was because of the lengths I still had from buying all the wooden dowels. I cut these at 26 inches, excuse me, and then that left me with 10 inches of room left over. So I cut these down to 7.5, and then I cut these ones at 7. It looks a lot more than 7 because this guitar is really heavy and it's leaning against that. I need to move it all the way to the back because I don't play that one much anyways. I don't play that Tele much. I play my Strat now. So at 7 inches in between, that actually is just a little bit too wide for my electric guitars. It probably would have been better at about 5.5 instead of 7, just taking 1.5 inches of room out of there. So down at the base, you can kind of see that there's about 1.5 to 2 inches here, and it's not standing up completely straight, so that's fine. Also, the other thing I maybe would have changed is instead of putting 45-degree angle cradles there, which I do like because they give it a lot more stability, you can't really knock this one over, and you can kind of shift this one just a little bit. Well, it's pretty stable on most of them, but I just don't think it was actually necessary because of the foam I have down here. It actually keeps it from sliding back and forth. But if you're going to be moving a lot, I would definitely use these 45-degree cradles because as far as moving goes, it does help solidify their position quite a bit better. So I don't think it's a big deal for me. I would have preferred if it stood a little bit more upright, but I figured I'd test it anyways. And so you can make your own choice on that. As far as these braces go, these are 5 inches from where they connect in this mount to where they connect in the middle. Like I say, if I was going to build this narrower for electric guitars, I would have built those probably at about 4 3/4 to 4 5/8 and come up with closer to an 8-inch spacing in between. And then all the way back, the farthest, that little foot that you can kind of see on the back next to my amplifier, that foot is about 4 inches wide, and then it has a stabilizer brace in between. So that brace just makes sure that it can't push, these guitars can't push the sides out away from each other and sit on the floor. So I don't know if that all made sense because of all the other details I was throwing in. So just to recap, 7 inches in between these two guitars, 7.5 on these two guitars, 26 inches tall, 90-degree angles that go into 9.5-inch spacing, and then 5 inches that go to a 45-degree angle and onto 90-degree angles on the arms. Now, if you're anything like me, you're going to change this design as soon as you are finished watching this video. So I'm going to give you a couple of ideas that you could change and maybe use the same principle for a better design. So first off, what you could do is instead of cutting these to 26 inches in length, you could actually cut them to 13, brace across them the entire way with the insulation that I have here, and then your guitars will sit about midway onto these posts, and it will actually work just fine. I've seen a ton of guitar stands that are actually very short in nature, and it'll get rid of some of this bow here, if you will, from just the longer posts being a little bit more, or a little bit less resistant to a little bit of sway. That's just kind of the way it works. Secondly, what you could do is actually, you could build this guitar stand so it would work around corners. So what I mean by that is if I cut one leg a little bit longer and the other leg a little bit shorter, and then I put two 90-degree angles on it, I could actually fit this guitar stand into a corner so I could have guitars running up against this wall and then up against this wall. So that's just an option if you want to connect, you know, two different stands together and have them, so maybe one is for your electrics on one side and one is for your acoustics on one side. You can actually, because of that principle, if you do your measurements right, you can make one guitar stand a little bit narrower and the other a little bit wider for your bigger acoustics and then your smaller electrics on the other side. Third, you could actually build this entire thing out of PVC if you wanted to. If that's all you can find, go get some, you know, I would stick with 3/4 inch or 1 inch PVC. It's going to be a little bit more expensive, but it'll also be stronger than 1/2 inch PVC, which is going to have quite a bit of flex to it. Lastly, and this is probably my favorite idea, what I would have liked to do is just build a double-sided stand like this, where it's got a small space in between, and then the stand that my bigger acoustic has where it's got the 45s that kind of slope up. I would like that for just kind of a centerpiece in the room or something like that. Maybe not like a really fancy room, but if I only had two guitars, I would have built it like that instead. You'd have kind of an empty space here, which would be fine. You'd have two guitars that were kind of facing each other, and it would just look a little bit nicer for two guitars instead of building them, you know, all consecutive like this. But I think for what it is, it looks pretty good. All that being said, I think it's a really cool guitar stand. I hope it works out good for any of you guys that choose to build one like this. And as far as time and cost, it really is pretty inexpensive if you enjoy DIY stuff, which I do, and I don't like waiting for stuff in the mail. I'd rather just get it myself in town and then build it. So with that, I'm going to let you guys go. If you guys enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up so that I know you enjoyed it. And if you guys want to subscribe, hang around. I've got a guitar that I am building that will be on the channel here pretty soon. And then I've got some other guitar content coming up in the future that you guys might enjoy. So please consider subscribing. I hope you guys have a great day. We'll see you later.